I'm Donna. I turned 52 last month. I live in a small town where everyone knows my name, my past, and most days, it feels like they even know my thoughts. Life has fallen into a predictable rhythm, where my days blend together, one indistinguishable from the next. I spend my mornings at the local bookstore, sipping coffee by the window, and my evenings at home, flipping through TV channels or reading dog-eared novels I've read 100 times. It's funny, I wasn't always this way. But after my divorce 7 years ago and with my kids grown and moved away, loneliness became an uninvited companion I learned to live with. I convinced myself this was enough, peaceful, uncomplicated, and safe. But on a gray Thursday afternoon, in the produce section of a small grocery store, I encountered someone that upended my quiet, predictable world. He was tall, with tousled hair and a kind smile. I noticed him looking at the avocados with a puzzled expression, a bag of tortilla chips already in his cart. I don't know what got into me, but I chuckled, not loud enough for him to hear, and then I found myself saying, "Need some help picking a ripe one?" He looked up, eyes brightening, and laughed. "I'm completely lost, actually. I never get these right." I showed him how to tell when they were ready, teaching him the trick of the gentle squeeze and the little stem check. We laughed together, and that moment felt electric, somehow unexpected. "My name's Nick," he said, extending his hand. He looked like he might be in his mid-30s, maybe early 40s. Younger, yet in his eyes there was a warmth that put me at ease. From that first encounter, something in me stirred that I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't love, not yet. It was possibility that I didn't expect to see Nick again. After all, how often do people bump into each other twice in this town if they aren't on each other's radar? But life has a funny way of bringing people together when you least expect it. A week after our avocado encounter, there he was at the coffee shop I always frequented. He walked right over with a warm smile, like he'd been hoping to see me. "Donna, right? The avocado expert," he joked, holding his coffee like it was some prized possession. I laughed, feeling a spark of surprise and pleasure. "That's me," I said, smiling back. "Did you enjoy your guacamole?" "Oh, it was a disaster," he said, grinning sheepishly. "I still need a little more practice, I think." We ended up chatting longer than I expected. He was funny, refreshingly down-to-earth, and easy to talk to. I felt a lightness in my chest, a feeling that had been absent for years. There was something about him that made me want to linger. Maybe it was the way he listened or how he could make me laugh without even trying. From that day on, our paths seemed to cross almost weekly. Sometimes it was in the grocery store, other times at the coffee shop. It wasn't long before I found myself looking forward to those encounters. Each time we met, he'd tell me something new about himself. A story from his travels, a memory from his childhood, or a small detail about his job as a graphic designer. And in turn, I'd find myself sharing pieces of my life too, stories about my kids, my travels, my old dreams I'd almost forgotten. As the weeks went by, our connection grew warmer, stronger. I started to feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. It was a rainy afternoon when I realized how deeply my feelings for Nick had grown. We were sitting in the corner booth of the coffee shop, sharing a piece of carrot cake, talking and laughing over stories that had lost their polish with anyone else. He had just finished telling me about a wild road trip he'd taken in his 20s, his eyes bright, hands animated. And I was sitting there captivated, watching every expression play across his face like he was the only person in the world. And then it hit me. This warmth I felt wasn't just about a friend, or even a companion. This was more. My heart was racing, my cheeks were flushed, and every little thing he did felt like it had meaning. I had fallen for him. I, a woman of 52, was feeling something so powerful, so real for a man young enough to change everything I'd come to believe about myself. Suddenly fear crept in. What would people think? How would he feel if he knew? I wasn't ready to admit my feelings, not even to myself, but there they were, all the same, raw and overwhelming. I felt a bit dizzy with the realization. Nick noticed my shift and put his hand over mine. "Donna, are you okay?" he asked gently, his eyes full of genuine concern. I nodded, trying to hold back the wave of emotions that were surging up. "Yes, just a little lost in thought," I said, managing a smile. But even as I answered, my heart was trembling. This wasn't something I could brush off or ignore. This was real and it mattered. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the ache of wanting something more than I could say aloud. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed our time together over and over, dissecting each glance, each laugh, and each little touch. Nick brought a rush of excitement that I thought only belonged to youth. A feeling I'd long since packed away with memories of my younger self. But he wasn't just a daydream, he was real and I was falling for him. A flurry of thoughts and emotions filled my heart. On one hand, I felt light and alive, eager for the chance at something new. On the other, doubt clawed at me. What if he didn't feel the same way? What if people judged us? There was a significant gap between our ages, and I could already hear the voices, the whispers of friends and neighbors. What does she think she's doing? She should know better. But when I thought of Nick, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe this was worth pursuing. He treated me with respect and warmth, and he seemed to enjoy our time together as much as I did. The way he looked at me, there was an intensity, a kindness, and something more. The age gap felt like a hurdle, yes, but it wasn't an impossible one. It wasn't enough to put out the spark. As the days went by, I found myself drifting into a familiar rhythm. Mornings at the bookstore, walks through the park, grocery runs. Only now there was an undercurrent of hope in everything. I'd catch myself daydreaming, wondering if he might surprise me at the coffee shop, or if we'd accidentally bump into each other on the street. With Nick, I was caught between the thrill of something new and the steady pulse of doubt. Each time we saw each other, I grew a bit braver, a bit bolder. Our talks became deeper, sometimes lingering past closing time. And slowly I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't one-sided. Maybe he felt something too. The age difference loomed over me like a storm cloud, but with every shared laugh, every lingering look, I felt it dissipate just a little bit more. I knew I'd have to make a choice soon, to pull back into the safety of solitude or take a step into the unknown. No matter the whispers, no matter the risks, that it wasn't until one Saturday evening, when I found myself standing in my kitchen, that I finally decided to take the plunge. The quiet hum of the house felt different that night, filled with an anxious anticipation that I could hardly bear. The house, once a place of solitude, now seemed too large for just me. The thought of Nick filled every empty corner of my thoughts. I had to do something. I wanted more. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for exactly. Maybe it was just to see him in a different light, beyond the casual coffee shop chats and grocery store encounters. Maybe I needed to know if this feeling was real, or if it was just some passing phase, something that would fade when the novelty wore off. I wiped my hands on the dish towel, glancing at the clock. It was already getting late. What if he didn't want to come? What if he felt uncomfortable, awkward, or worse? What if he thought it was strange that I, a woman in her 50s, would even think to invite him over? The age gap still felt like this enormous weight in my mind, a wall I wasn't sure how to climb. But then I remembered the way he smiled when he looked at me, the way he listened so intently when I spoke. Those moments were precious. Those moments told me that he saw me as more than just my age, my history, my safe routine. Maybe, just maybe, he wanted this too. I took a deep breath, my fingers trembling as I dialed his number. My heart was in my throat as I waited for him to pick up. Hello. Nick's voice was warm, familiar. Hey Nick, I said, my voice a little shakier than I'd intended. It's Donna. I was wondering if you'd like to come over for dinner tonight? Just a casual thing, nothing fancy. I thought it might be nice. There was a long pause. My stomach twisted. I almost hung up, but then I heard him say, his tone light but sincere. I'd love to, Donna. I'll be there in about an hour. I'm looking forward to it. And just like that, a simple invitation became the start of something I hadn't even realized I was ready for. I hung up, my heart racing in anticipation. I had invited him into my world, into the quiet sanctuary of my home, and I had no idea what would happen next. But I knew this. I was no longer afraid of what might be. When Nick walked through my door an hour later, I felt my breath catch. He was dressed casually, but there was something different in the way he carried himself, something more intimate about his presence in my home. The usual playful smile was there, but his eyes, there was something more serious in them, like he'd been thinking about this moment too. Hi, he said, his voice soft as he stepped inside, giving me a quick hug. It smells amazing in here. I smiled, trying to keep my nerves at bay. I hope you're hungry. I made pasta. Nothing too fancy, but I think it'll do. We moved to the dining table, the evening unfolding slowly, comfortably. There was no tension, no awkwardness, Just a quiet understanding between us. A sense of ease that had only grown since we first met. As we ate, we laughed about our awkward cooking experiences, swapped stories about our families, and reminisced about travels. Every now and then, our hands brushed over the table, and I felt that electric pulse between us again. But it wasn't until we moved to the living room, glasses of wine in hand, that the air shifted. I wasn't sure what it was, whether it was the way Nick looked at me, or the way his hand rested on the back of the couch so close to mine, but suddenly I was aware of every inch of him. I could feel the tension building between us, the space between friendship and something more, something dangerous yet so right. Nick turned to face me, his eyes darkening slightly. "Donna," he said, his voice low. "I've been thinking about this for a while. About us." The words hung in the air, heavy and uncertain. I swallowed, my throat dry, unsure of how to respond. My heart was racing, and I was suddenly acutely aware of how close we were, of how much I wanted him to close that last bit of distance between us. Before I could say anything, Nick leaned in, his lips soft against mine. It was gentle at first, a simple brush of contact, but something in me snapped. I didn't pull away. Instead, I leaned in closer, deepening the kiss. I felt him respond immediately, his hand cupping the side of my face, holding me to him as the kiss grew more urgent, more desperate. There was no more hesitation, no more fear of judgment. In that moment, there was only the connection between us, the warmth, the undeniable chemistry that had been building since that first accidental meeting in the grocery store. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathless, I knew it wasn't just a kiss. It was the beginning of something new, something that defied all the rules I had set for myself. I felt a mix of excitement and fear, but in my heart, I knew this was right. The night unfolded like a dream, as if time had stopped, and all that mattered was the space between us. We didn't speak much after that kiss, and in the quiet of my living room, I found myself savoring the closeness that had come so unexpectedly. His presence was a balm to a part of me I hadn't known was so starved for connection. There was no rush, no expectations, just the two of us finally openly acknowledging the pull we'd both felt since the beginning. Nick's hand found its way to mine again, gently, almost hesitantly at first, but then it was as if we were both waiting for the same thing, to allow this to unfold without fear. "Donna," he whispered, his voice softer than before. "I don't want to rush this, but I need you to know. I feel something real here. Something more than just the fun we've had." My heart swelled at his words. For so long, I had kept my emotions at arm's length, afraid of the consequences of giving too much. But sitting here with him, I couldn't deny it any longer. I felt the same. I needed to let go of the fear that had kept me isolated for so long, the fear that my age would define me, that the world would see me as out of place in this kind of connection. "Me too," I murmured, my voice shaking slightly. "I've been afraid to admit it, but I can't keep pretending that this isn't more than I expected it to be." Nick's gaze softened, and he brushed a strand of hair from my face, his touch tender and reassuring. "We don't have to figure it all out right now. We just need to be honest with ourselves, right?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak anymore. It was true. All the doubts and worries I'd carried with me, the judgments I feared, the societal whispers that seemed to haunt my every thought, didn't matter in the face of what was real between us. What mattered was the way he made me feel, alive, desired, seen. And I wanted to see where this could go, without worrying about what others might think. We spent the rest of the night wrapped in each other, both physically and emotionally, as if the world outside had fallen away completely. When Nick kissed me again, it was different, deeper, more meaningful. We made love, not out of desperation, but out of a shared connection that was more than just physical. It was a giving and receiving of trust, of acceptance, and a quiet surrender to what had been building between us for so long. Afterward, we lay together in silence, the weight of the moment settling between us like a soft, comforting blanket. My body hummed with a kind of peace I hadn't known in years. I had allowed myself to let go, to embrace something that defied every expectation I'd placed on myself. And in that moment, I knew I was no longer afraid of what the future held. Nick's arms tightened around me, and I felt him kiss the top of my head. "We don't have to figure it all out now," he repeated softly, as if he could read my mind. "We'll take it one day at a time. No pressure. Just us." And for the first time in a long while, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Not just for the future, but for the possibility that love, no matter the age, could be as simple as two people finding each other and allowing themselves to feel what they both wanted to feel. The weeks that followed felt like a slow, beautiful unfolding of something neither of us had anticipated. We spent more time together, both in public and in private, navigating the newness of our relationship with the tender care. In the mornings we would walk in the park, chatting about everything and nothing. At night we would cook dinner together, laughing over burned meals and spilled wine, finding joy in the ordinary moments. But what struck me most was how effortlessly our connection had deepened. There were no barriers between us. Not the age gap, not the fears, not even the doubts that had once crept into my mind. When we were together, it felt natural, as if we had always known one another. There was no pretense, just honesty and the shared understanding that what we had was real. One evening, as we sat on my couch, watching an old movie and sharing a glass of wine, Nick turned to me and said, "You know, Donna, I never thought I'd be in a relationship like this. I thought I knew what love was, but this feels different. It feels like home." His words hit me like a wave, washing over me in a flood of emotion. I had never expected to feel this way again. Not at my age, not after everything I had been through. But there I was, sitting next to him with my heart wide open, filled with a love that defied all the rules I had once believed in. "Me too," I said softly, looking into his eyes. "I never thought I'd be here either. But I'm so glad I am." And just like that, I realized that love in its truest form has no age. It doesn't care about the years that separate two people, or the judgments of others. It doesn't care about the past, the mistakes, or the fears. Love simply is. As time went on, we found ourselves talking about the future, about what we wanted, where we wanted to go, and how we saw each other fitting into it. I had my doubts, of course. I wondered how the world would view us, whether our families would accept this new dynamic. But every time I looked at Nick, I knew that it was worth it. He was worth it. One evening, after months of growing closer, Nick took me by surprise. He had always been gentle, thoughtful, never rushing, but that night he seemed different. As we sat on the porch looking at the stars, he took my hand in his and said, "Donna, I love you. I don't care about the age difference. I don't care about what anyone thinks. I just know that I want to spend my life with you." The words hung in the air, and my heart swelled. There was no hesitation in my response, no doubts. "I love you too. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." A few months later, Nick and I were married in a quiet ceremony surrounded by our closest friends and family. It wasn't grand or extravagant, but it was perfect. Just the two of us, united in our love and our commitment to one another, despite everything that had tried to tell us it couldn't work. And as I stood there, holding his hand, I realized that love doesn't care about timing or expectations. It doesn't follow rules. It simply chooses in its own way and in its own time. We had found each other against the odds, and we weren't going to let anything stop us now. Age had never mattered. What mattered was that we had found something real, something worth fighting for. Love at any age is a gift. A beautiful, unexpected gift. And I had finally learned to embrace it, to embrace him without fear or regret. We had our whole life ahead of us, and for the first time in years I felt truly, completely alive.